Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another show for a first episode of a brand new series called the Managerial Tactical Breakdown. Now, long-time listeners to the show, well, not even a long time, but last 6 months or so, since the content have really sort of stepped up, knows that over the summer we did a tactical breakdown series looking at specific transfer targets, broke them down, and you guys seem to really enjoy the content. So now that things are, let's say, far from rosy at Arsenal at the moment, I thought it might be a good idea to sort of discuss some of the managerial candidates that could eventually, if it happens, take over from Unai Emery in the near or far future, no matter what seems to happen. And I'm very happy to be joined by someone who has joined us a few times on this show and obviously a big fan of his own podcast. It's Mr. Jon Driscoll. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, Tom. Hello the Gunners fans out there as well.
Yes. Now, last time we spoke, this was just as Emery had been appointed. You came on, you chatted a bit about him, and some of it was good in the first part of the season. But you did raise some concerns at the time, and I think those concerns have happened. And don't worry, people, we will discuss Unai Emery a little bit later on. But the whole point that we are here is that the first episode of this managerial tactical breakdown is to look at Luis Enrique, however you pronounce his name. But the point is, I know that people are going to say that it's not going to happen because that was all quashed in the media very recently with an article in The Athletic. But the point of this series is to sort of look at managers that could possibly take over from him in the future. I remember a time when Aubameyang seemed completely ridiculous, and then he's now at Arsenal. So I think there's a point to look at these candidates in different ways and get some of the expert thoughts as well. So, John, my first question is, because of how Arsenal are with Unai Emery, the biggest criticism of him is sort of a lack in coherent style that we're seeing on the pitch. If Luis Enrique was to take over this team, what would be the style that he would employ onto this side?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And you could raise the same criticism against Luis Enrique that is now currently raised against Unai Emery. So you're not necessarily getting an automatic fix with Luis Enrique. When he first took over at Barcelona, there was a certain switch of style. They went a little bit more direct than they had under Pep and then the interim managers. And it was a little bit controversial at first, but it worked out very well. And then, I don't know if you remember, in his first season, he was getting dogs abuse. So, you think Unai Emery gets stick now, but, try being a Barcelona manager when they're struggling and you've changed the style. And then they came through, and in the second half of that treble season, they played some of the best football that you've ever seen. So, reasonably high tempo, but skillful, adaptable. So not Pep Guardiola. He did change Barcelona, and they did play a style that fans of the English Premier League wouldn't find that unusual. They moved it quickly. They were prepared to counter-attack. They were prepared to hold possession when they wanted to. Did a very good job for 2 seasons. Third season, it all started to unravel a little bit, or at least that was the perception. Except when you invited me on, I thought, how many points did they get in that last season? They got 90 points in that last season. Yeah. They finished second by 3 points to Real Madrid, who had a shed load of refereeing decisions go their way in that season.
That doesn't ever happen.
Yeah. Well, obviously we've got VAR now, and Real Madrid fans are adjusting to the new reality. For all of the downsides of VAR, what you don't get is you don't get to the end of a season and think, hang on, that club had a lot of decisions go their way. And that's what happened against Luis Enrique in his third and final season with Barcelona. Now, Barcelona's a special case because obviously you got Messi, and so that's the man that you've got to build the team around. So everybody has got to deal with it like it's a problem. I mean, it's not a problem, is it? It's the world's best problem. Celta Vigo, they played nice football. So again, not a million miles away from what you younger Arsenal fans expect of Arsenal because of the good days of Wenger, where Arsenal played a nice combination of fast-paced but still stylish football. So he had a good season with Celta Vigo, had a season in Italy with Roma that didn't work out particularly well. He was inexperienced then. He'd been the Barcelona B team coach, having had a spell out of football. Obviously, again, if you're young, you might not remember, he was a very, very good player, Luis Enrique, played for Real Madrid and Barcelona, and lots of times for Spain as well. So a very decorated, hard-working, grafting kind of player. So the stylish teams that he has produced as a coach are a little different, not really in his image as a player. As a man, he's prickly. probably doesn't quite have that sort of disarming charm that Unai Emery has. Yeah. Although obviously, as the Gunners' results aren't very good, that charm wins.
When I was looking through the photos to make the thumbnail, and I was like, I need to get sort of a headshot of Luis Enrique, and 90% of them are frowns. That's what they are. Yeah. So I mean, that's sort of the personalities. I mean, Arsenal fans want, and what they're getting so frustrated about is this sort of lack of chance creation. Now, Barcelona, what you get with Barcelona is always going to be usually plenty of chances being made and a domination of possession. If he was to come in, Unai Emery seems, and people get frustrated that he really sort of does bombard the wings, but doesn't really attack the box, even though he's using the wide areas quite well. With Enrique, was it a case where the quality shone through just purely because you had Messi and Neymar and Suarez and those guys? Or actually, did he manage to sort of employ his own sort of what he wanted to see on the pitch? Or was it sort of just being not even the puppeteer, but just being sort of puppeted around because of the players that he had at his disposal?
Probably the second more than the first, but then that would say that's a pragmatic way of using what he had available. He had, arguably at the time, well, maybe not Ronaldo, but you could argue 3 of the 4 best strikers in the world. So you put the achievements into that context. You had Neymar, Messi, Luis Enrique, Luis Suarez, a fully fit and firing Luis Suarez, who I know he's slowed down a bit now, but in those days he was an awesome beast, wasn't he, Luis Suarez? And so he adapted a system to them, and so they, in a sense, a lot of the criticism was that the front 3 were often a bit detached from the rest of the team. But then, what a front 3! And so it put a bit of a burden on the midfield. But I suppose the crucial thing from your point of view is that he is adaptable. The Barcelona team wasn't like the Celta Vigo team. There were obvious similarities in that Celta Vigo played nice football, but Celta Vigo were a slower build-up team with wingers, with a clever central striker, and so certain similarities, as I say. But then he adapted to the fact that at Barcelona he had those 3 magnificent players, and so in a sense, slightly oversimplifying it, he gave those 3 guys a platform and a slightly harder working midfield.
Yeah, and whilst the midfield and the attack was always going to be great at Barca, the other end of the scale is something that Arsenal fans really want, because the defence is always going to be this sort of area that at Arsenal, whether it was under Arsene Wenger in his early years, he sort of inherited this amazing defence, and it's evolved to very much when Cesc Fabregas came to the team under Arsene Wenger, a shift and looking at more technical players. And towards the end of that, it kind of went to his detriment, because he came up against other sides in the Premier League that went down the more big, rough and ready sort of players that could still play football. Emery's now taken over a side that are defensively flawed in so many areas. He's improved things by bringing in Tierney. I think that David Luiz is arguably an upgrade on what we had, even though he's not the best defender in the world. And then you've got the case where would Enrique be someone to come in and then improve on the defensive areas that we've seen? I mean, there was someone in the chat a second ago just asked the question in terms of it. I will pop it up when you're talking about it. But in terms of the defence, would Enrique improve what we've got already?
Oh, that's a good question. I can think of better candidates, Tom, if I'm honest. Yeah, I know we'll focus on Luis Enrique, but for example, Marcelino, who is another very accomplished Spanish manager, he has always had a reputation for tightening up defences. Luis Enrique, I don't think there's much evidence for that, if I'm honest with you. Roma were criticised for not being great defensively, Celta Vigo, and then Barcelona. Barcelona have always had a pretty good defensive record, but largely as a result of a couple of good, a quick centre-back in his day, PK, and they try to fix a way around that now, and then retaining possession, rather than it being defensive organisation that was key for them. Because, as we've seen in the Enrique period before and after as well, their undoing sometimes has been when teams have really got at them. So I don't think, I'd be surprised if an awful lot of time was spent on the training ground drilling a defence. So whether he's the man to come in and turn Socrates and Mustafi into world-beating defenders, no, is my short answer to that.
But it's interesting you mentioned Marcelino, because Ben Parfitt in the chat said, are there any other La Liga managers? And before we came live, you mentioned about Marcelino, and I said that I think it might be interesting to do a show specifically on Marcelino himself as a possible candidate. Dave Atkinson asked what about his time in Rome. He heard that it was quite poor. Obviously, his Celta Vigo time was what sort of earned him that role at Barcelona. Do you sort of buy into looking at managers past previous clubs? Like Dave says there that his time at Rome was poor, but is it important to sort of take more notice of what happened more recently, or can you actually take quite a lot of interest in what happened in the past?
You've got to have a quick look, haven't you? Because obviously the Rome experience is his only foreign experience, which is, you've got to take that into account, haven't you? You know, the guy is Spanish, he played in Spain, lived his life in Spain, and so we don't know. He speaks some English, but we don't know. I have no idea whether he watches Premier League football, whether he's interested in Premier League football. And it's a criticism of the Premier League. I know there's the upside, isn't there, in that we've brought some of the world's greatest minds have come to the Premier League, and you look at the top of the Premier League now, and it's full of foreign coaches who brought some of the best influences along. But there have been a lot of failures along the way. Yeah. The Pepe Mel brigade who turn up and turns out he doesn't speak any English, and apparently he was wandering around at West Brom and no one spoke to him, and they just got on without him. Luis Enrique is not in that is not in that category. So yeah, you would have to have a look at what he did at Roma, but it was quite a while ago, wasn't it? Because he went to obviously had the season at Celta Vigo. It wasn't the only thing that got him the job the season at Celta Vigo. The fact that he was a Barcelona player and he'd been the Barcelona B team coach was a factor. They place a lot of emphasis on that, because Valverde, who's the current Barcelona manager, part of him getting the job was that he was a Barcelona player in the past. Only for a couple of years. He wasn't exactly a stalwart of Barcelona. But most of his experience is after Roma. It was a long time ago. He was young. It was his first job of that magnitude. And I think it's really important with managers. You've got to let them improve. You can't judge a guy on the first couple of years of his managerial career, but we do. But it's important to let a guy develop in the job. And then obviously, his most recent experience was as the Spain national team coach, which is a very, very different job indeed, isn't it? But they were looking good when obviously it's terrible, tragic circumstances that he's not currently managing Spain. But he was also doing a good job there, and they were playing good football.
Yeah. Matt Hales says Enrique knows how to get the best out of the attack 100%. And sort of the next question, tactically looking at things, worried to take over, bearing in mind if they're still here, if he was to take over next season. Aubameyang, Lacazette and Pepe have sort of been highlighted as the three that need to be playing, and Emery's sort of been reluctant to play all three, and especially with Ozil in behind them. In fact, we're still yet to see those three play as a front three with Ozil in behind. At Barcelona, Neymar and Messi sort of inverted wingers, left-footed on the right side, right-footed on the left side, although Neymar can pretty much use anything, any part of his body these days. And then Suarez in the middle. You've got Lacazette there. You've got Aubameyang as right-footed on the left, Pepe is left-footed on the right. How much sort of mirror image would we see in a tactical style? Or, as we mentioned earlier, the quality and the dictatorship from the players themselves was so strong in that Barcelona side. Would we actually see more of Arsenal's players taking over and taking the limelight and sort of getting their own personality on the pitch? Or would it be down to Enrique, what he would employ?
It's quite a strong character, Luis Enrique. Barcelona and the strength of those players, I think, isn't the same with the current Arsenal players, not just in terms of ability, in terms of their background, in terms of the strength of their political position within the club, particularly Messi, of course, because if Messi really wants to cause trouble for a coach, the coach will be sacked at Barcelona because of the unique circumstances. There's no strict parallel with that at Arsenal. When you look at those players, he's not a giddy coach, Luis Enrique. I know they play good attacking football, and it's a fair point that he got good stuff out of their attack. They scored a lot of goals. They played some great football when he really got them going and firing, particularly in the second half of the treble-winning season. But if you look at those players, can you really see all of those players playing together in the same team? It would be. I mean, I'm a neutral, so I don't care if you concede 5 goals. So I say yes. But
Emery says he'd rather win 5-4 than 1-0. So
yeah, so stick them all in and play together. But I can understand if it was my job on the line. It's a very different matter then, isn't it? So he's a good attacking coach. he's not a basketball coach. It's not going to get silly.
Yeah. No, and maybe that's more to say that what Arsenal are looking for is to be a little bit more conservative than we have seen under Emery. Although under Emery, and we will come and talk about Emery in just a second, we have seen, I'd argue, a decline in the defensive side of things at Arsenal. But I'm interested actually to get your view on the link that was made between Arsenal and Enrique coming through. Don Raul, as he's being called, or he was called in the summer. Not so much now with the reluctance to move on Emery at the moment. Do you think that Raul Sanllehi, from his time at Barcelona, is someone who's quite overawing, someone who likes to take control of things as much as possible? And if he can employ someone after Emery that's another Spaniard, because that is, and from his time at Barcelona, knowing Enrique, do you think that his choice and the links to Enrique are very much down to Raul being a very overawing character?
Yeah, it would seem to. I must admit, when I first saw it, I thought that's a strange link. And I was very skeptical when I first saw it, because it hasn't been long since he quit the Spain job after the death of his daughter, and so that situation doesn't change. I mean, thank God I've never experienced anything as terrible as that. So you just, it's hard to say. At some point, you've got to go back to work, haven't you? But I don't know. It doesn't strike me that a move to a new league, to the pressure of being in charge of a club of Arsenal's size and magnitude, of picking up a team that's, I don't think it's doing disastrously badly, but does have work to do. It's not an easy transition to make, is it? So it was a strange link to me, and obviously he knows him. He's got a relationship. So if it was just a conversation, if it was, Luis, how are you doing, mate? I hope you're well. When are you coming back? If you're thinking of getting back in, let me know. Right, that conversation would make sense. Why that then got out in public doesn't quite make sense, does it? Except unless they're deliberately trying to undermine Unai Emery, which I don't see why they would particularly want to do that at the moment. They don't need to undermine Unai Emery. If they want him out, they can sack him. That option is there, and it's not as if Luis Enrique is agitating for a job. It's not like an out of work. So many out of work managers, they always appear on Sky. So when they're out of work, they suddenly see them everywhere.
Mourinho everywhere.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, Mourinho. You can't move for Mourinho now at the moment, can you? And you can imagine an agent. You can imagine an agent putting stuff out there. I don't think that's the case with Luis Enrique at the moment. So it's a strange link, and it's not brilliant, is it? Again, looking as an outsider, I don't want to be too critical of Arsenal, but there are improvements in the running of the club that need to be made at Arsenal, aren't there? Such as the transfer record, such as paying the right amount of money for a player, and also in your unique circumstances is that you, as a club, as an institution, have virtually no experience of sacking and appointing a new manager. Obviously, just about every other football club has been through about 50 managers since since Wenger went in. So, and
there was also a story that came out recently about how the Arsenal board didn't want to go down the same route that Manchester United have since Sir Alex Ferguson left, because they don't want to see that sort of the run of just a string of managers. However, there are plenty of teams across not just England but the continent that replace their managers. I mean, in England, you're looking at Chelsea that replace their manager consistently and get a lot of success in that. And there's opportunities to see that across Europe as well. So it's an odd one. I mean, it's a nice segue to go on to talking about Emery specifically now. I mean, my first question is, are you surprised after our chat over 12 months ago now that this is the way it's gone? Or are you sort of thinking, well, yeah, that seems about right?
The second one just seems about right. I can't remember exactly what I said. I think my argument was that he was about the level that you might expect in Arsenal's circumstances at the time. In the he had the European medals, almost won another one. I know the final in Baku was bad, but you were 90 minutes, a good performance away from winning a European trophy under Unai Emery. In which case, you'd have said, given that his CV is about winning the Europa League, that would have been job done in a way. You're about where you were. There's no obvious signs of improvement, and obviously after Wenger left, your first thought is that we won't see some obvious signs of improvement. I understand why he's under pressure because you're looking at it and you're thinking, where's he going? What's the plan? Where's the next level of improvement coming from, other than just buying a load more players in the transfer market? And for all sixth in the league, you look at sixth in the league. Well, sixth in the league early in the season, you're above Manchester United. You're 8 places above Tottenham. The points tally isn't good, is it? And the top 4, the top 4. I mean, it could be the dullest Premier League in history. This couldn't it? Because Liverpool are 8 points clear, and then you've got the 3, and then you've got another 8-point gap between 4th and 5th. So there might not be an awful lot of the season. We might be looking back at the end of the season thinking, actually, you know what, it was all done in November. And so Arsenal could be in a battle for a top 6 place again. It's not disastrous, but I can understand. As an
I know a lot of people that would disagree.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's easy to be dispassionate about other people's club, isn't it? And you're sort of looking in. I understand that you would want at least a crack at the Champions League, but you're not out of the Champions League reckoning yet. Chelsea have got a bad spell in them. Leicester are doing brilliantly at the moment, but they'll have a decline at the moment.
Well, we said that, and then they won the league.
Yeah, but they won't. Leicester won't win the league this season, though, will they? Because the season, just to go down a cul-de-sac. The season Leicester won the league, all the other big clubs were in a mess or in a period of transition, and so they did brilliantly that season. It was tremendous fun, but those circumstances won't replicate again because Liverpool are looking so good, aren't they, at the moment? So there's no way Liverpool are going to be dropping. I mean, they might drop 8 points, but they're not dropping 30 points between now and the end of the season, are they, Liverpool? So Leicester aren't going to win the league. The only possibility is that Man City get their act together again, but I can't see that. But in short, slightly below par. Unai Emery, I don't think you need to rush to replace him. And I think the wise thing. So, was it wise to contact Luis Enrique? Yes, I suppose the wise thing is check who is available, check who would actually come. So, would Allegri come? Would you be therefore thinking of Marcelino's the best we're going to do? Is he an upgrade on Emery? As opposed to doing the Everton thing and sacking a guy and then spending weeks casting around for someone to replace him.
Yeah, no, I see the point of. I mean, just keeping in touch and keeping that. I mean, we saw the what went on with the word I'm looking for, shortlist of managers that was around when Arsene Wenger left. There was the likes of Allegri on there. I don't know if you actually saw the list that was published. It was released recently that they interviewed the likes of Allegri, Arteta, and all these players, managers. But Emery sort of just stunned them. And one of the reasons, one of the things we did talk about in that interview over a year ago now was the sort of the defensive side of Emery and what we thought he would improve. And Chris P, and I appreciate the donation, Chris, he says that there wasn't enough investment in the defence in the summer that was needed, and that's where we were poor. Emery is not all to blame. And I sort of agree with the fact that we didn't really invest enough in the defence. I thought we brought in a top-class prospect in Kieran Tierney. David Luiz was clearly not the first choice for the centre-back that we wanted. We were linked with Upamecano of RB Leipzig. We were linked with Izzo from Torino, for instance, and these players that are more established. But do you think that Emery, or you expected Emery to do more? Because in my opinion, I've seen a decline in our defensive side of our game than at the end of Arsene Wenger's era. Does that surprise you because of what he did when he was at the likes of Sevilla?
Not massively, no. He always had hard-working teams, so maybe there are one or two. Maybe his issue with Ozil is that he doesn't like. He doesn't like what might be perceived as a bit of a slacker. I agree with the question that when you look at the money Arsenal invested, Pepe is a good player, but that was a hell of a lot of money to be spending on a player who I don't think anybody else was looking to spend that kind of money on. And then you're looking for that solid defensive reinforcement. Don't want to come on your podcast and start criticising Arsenal players.
What are you here for, mate? I do it pretty much every week.
But if you said right, so what you need at Arsenal is an experienced international central defender who's got loads of titles in his bag and he's played for big clubs before. You said, yes, he's the man. Then he says David Luiz. You say, hang on, no, I didn't want that particular experienced international defender because he wasn't it wasn't the rock solid, calm head that Arsenal needed. Now, Mustafi was a good player at Valencia. And when you speak to Premier League fans,
I've said that so many times that people were like, "Nah, you're lying."
I know. People don't, because would you believe it's Otamendi and Mustafi were the two centre backs?
Yeah.
But I suppose this takes us back to a guy we mentioned briefly, Marcelino. Maybe it was just. Actually, was he in charge of Valencia at the time? I'm losing it. Don't quote me on that. Yeah.
Gary Neville definitely managed Mustafi because I remember him talking.
Yeah.
Right. I think
so it might have been the season of
at the end of it.
Nuno, might it? Yeah. Right. Okay. So let's not give Marcelino credit for that. But it was Otamendi and Mustafi, and they were really good together. Yeah. And Otamendi was the sort of the hot-headed one, funnily enough, and Mustafi was the sort of calming influence alongside him.
Calm and Mustafi together.
I know. Yeah. And so I suppose that is a criticism of Unai Emery, is that you and I, Tom, are the only people involved in this who know that there is a good Mustafi under there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm not that surprised. I do think also in speaking about Emery that the language is a barrier. I know he's worked. It's impressive. Everybody loves the fact that he comes on and says good evening, all credit to him for learning it. But it's a curve that you're on, isn't it? When you're coming to a country that you've never coached in before, that you didn't play in before. He wasn't a particularly illustrious player, Unai Emery, and it's just a lot to get your head around. Different league, different style of football, a lot to get your head around. So, like I say, it's about par, slightly below par, and yes, the defending could be better.
There was a question that came in. I'm starting to round down. I've only got a few minutes left. That was from 95 Winston, and he says, if Emery has always changed his formations and his tactics regularly, and his formations and rotation, has it always been a heavy fixture of his career? Yeah,
and real massive change of personnel as well from
game severe as well, I suppose.
So from game to game. And from midweek to Saturday, and he sort of got away with it. But if you remember, those Europa League wins were achieved at the expense of Sevilla's league position. I think, if I remember right, so again casting my mind back, I think Sevilla probably should have been finishing fourth in his seasons there, and they didn't. So in a sense, people in the Premier League would freak out at this. He prioritised the Europa League above the Champions League, and Sevilla, loads of football fans would like that. You'd say, no, we'll give up the Champions League money, but we want to lift a trophy. It's a terribly old-fashioned notion. So I liked when he did that, but he chopped and changed the team a lot.
Yeah, I'm interested by the point you made about the Europa League thing, Nick. Because he's in a position now where he is 9 points off fourth place with Leicester and Chelsea. You say there earlier on that you expect them to drop, but I don't see that happening at the moment. They look in insane form. Do you think he will now prioritise the Europa League at this point over knowing his history in that competition?
Yes, there's no reason that you can't juggle at the moment and try to still get into the top four and get through the Europa League. But I think if you're not in a better position come the spring, then the obvious thing is to go flat out for the Europa League. I think that would be the sensible thing to do. He's done it before. He's done it successfully. The downside of that, of course, it is a knockout competition, and there are some good teams in it. So, there are plenty of teams in there who could beat Arsenal over two legs if they did it well. But you would genuinely have a crack at winning the Europa League. So that's one for you, isn't it? And everyone watching. Would you happily sacrifice the top four if that meant you winning the Europa League?
It is a tough one. I think that it gets to a certain point where you're so far off the top four that you then have to go one way over the other. The problem with that is that it's putting all your eggs in a basket that with one game and it's done. It's over, and then your season's finished, and there's not much else to fight for. I have the initial sort of feeling that he will prioritise the Europa League eventually, because I can't see us catching Leicester and Chelsea. Maybe Leicester, maybe they will have a dip because they can't maybe keep up this intensity for the amount of time they need to. Although without any European football themselves, maybe they can. Chelsea, on the other hand, handicapped by the transfer ban, but this young side has really sort of shown under Lampard what they're about and the quality that's within them. We are going to round down now. Last question for you is sort of out. I don't want to say an out of 10, but two questions, I suppose. How realistic would you see Luis Enrique taking over from Unai Emery? And secondly, out of 10, how successful would you see it going?
Right. Okay. I'm going to put a rider on it, Tom. It's a question of when. Now, if the people who have given up on Unai Emery get their way, then Luis Enrique doesn't look like a realistic short-term prospect to me. I haven't really seen him linked with other jobs yet. I think the most obvious next step for Luis Enrique would be to go back to Spain and be the Spain coach again, because the guy in charge at the moment is Robert Moreno, who was his number 2, who was a bit of a surprise to be given the job, but it's sort of a continuity candidate. So my reading of that is it's there for him to go back and maybe work alongside Robert Moreno. So I think it's a long shot that Luis Enrique would be the next coach of Arsenal. The longer Emery survives, the more likely it becomes. And what was the other question? How successful would he be?
How successful would you see it going?
He would be. He's a good manager. He doesn't have the Mourinho thing or the Pep thing of building successfully at many different clubs. All of his real success came at Barcelona when they had that Messi, Neymar, Suarez front three. Good. 7 out of 10.
Okay. I don't think that would impassion too many Arsenal fans, 7 out of 10. Because I think they see Emery as a bit of a 7 out of 10 when he joined. But I'm on the side that I wouldn't pick Enrique as the guy. I mean, we're doing a show tomorrow with Tom from the other Bundesliga podcast looking at Marco Rose of Borussia Mönchengladbach. I know him well from his time at Red Bull Salzburg, and that's sort of the guy and the ilk of manager that I would go for. Not necessarily this hyper manager that's been at these big clubs, but looks like he's progressing and improving and learning his trade more and gradually taking those steps. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tom has to say tomorrow. But based on the now, really appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time out of your evening, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you dipped away. Sorry. Tom,
oh, it's nearly perfect. I said I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come on, mate.
No, my pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Do you want to plug your podcast so people can check it out?
Yeah, good point. So it is Eltel and John's La Liga Weekly. We basically call it La Liga Weekly, but that's Sky owned that. So when Sky stopped, don't get me into it. When Sky stopped doing the Spanish football and it disappeared off to 11, we carried it on. So it's La Liga Weekly, Eltel and John's La Liga Weekly. It's basically Terry Gibson, who is a brilliant pundit of Spanish football. So if you're not watching the Spanish football regularly, it's on Premier Sports if you want to watch it. But if you're not seeing it regularly, you want to keep up with what's going on with their 30-40 minutes every week. Audio Boom, Eltel and John's La Liga Weekly. And please have a listen.
Yeah, he's so good. I can forgive him being an ex-Spurs player. I
didn't mention that. But yes, he is. Yeah, great to say.
But no, he is brilliant. And I will leave the link to the description and, of course, the Twitter account in all of the posts, so you can check that out after on playback. But once again, John, really appreciate you coming on and spending the time.
Pleasure.
We will see you again tomorrow for the next episode, Tactical Breakdown at Managerial Edition. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.